This is Parker with AccuBrew, and welcome to Time as an Ingredient. Today we have our guest Michael Vetter of Vetter Homebrew Supply, and a special guest, our engineer and developer from AccuBrew, who is our in-house brewer, Bradley Fernandez. And he's brewing in probably twice a week and takes advantage of Michael's homebrew store. So we want to talk about the state of brewing and what you can do to get started. So what is the state of home brewing?
Oh yeah,
let's just
jump right in.
Dive right in.
Sure.
Well, I tell you what, we can edit that. What's your background? How did you get into this? Let's start from the easy way, I guess.
I'll be honest with you. I homebrewed a long time ago, and I started at Mary's Trailer, down in Pinellas Park, and I bought a kit off the shelf over 20 years ago probably, and ripped the yeast off the top of that canister that was covered in dust and had come from Europe, England. I think it was an English pale, and I made that beer. Boy, I made that beer, delivered it to my friends, and they were like, "This is great, thank you," and they had that look on their face like, "I'm only saying this because it was free, and I don't, I didn't have to pay for it." But those were the days of Bud, McLight, McUltra didn't even come around yet. I mean, so this was a bold beer for them, and
this was before the bottle law changed.
Everything, yes.
So there really wasn't anything.
There really wasn't, right. And they liked it, but I kind of burned out pretty quick because it wasn't the quality level that I wanted. It wasn't what I like to drink, and I couldn't find what I like to drink on the shelf to make. So fast forward 20 years, and I would say probably about, I want to say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I went to a Pub Guild meeting that was held at Greg Rapp's house with my son-in-law, Michael, and he's like, "Let's go check it out." So we go and check it out. I said, "I did this already," I get to his house. He's got a 6'8" tapper in the living room. God bless his wife, right? I mean, he's got a tapper in his living room, and he's got a stout on the end. He's got taps across the front, and I poured a beer. I'm watching all these guys brewing around the pool, and I drink his beer, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I had to look in the kegerator to see if those weren't professional kegs, and they were all cornies. And I'm like, "Greg, you got to tell me." He's like, "Oh yeah, this I do. I'm an all grain brewer. I brew everything." And I'm like, "All grain?" All this was new. Yeah. So it opened my eyes to it. I got super excited. We started attending Pub Guild meetings. They were down in Largo, and eventually got a great group of guys that I regularly brewed with. Many of them gone on to become professional brewers or moved on to other parts of the country over the years, but kind of got us hooked, and that's kind of where I'm at. And the whole homebrew store thing, that kind of came out of having to find a retirement plan. So I'm a teacher, 34 years with Pinellas County Schools, but I'm getting ready to retire. I entered drop, but I had to start this homebrew store earlier because craft brew was taking off. Dunedin was booming with new places, and I'm like, "Honey, to my wife, if we don't do this right away, somebody else is going to open a homebrew." Because right now our choice is Mary down in Pinellas Park, very small beer section at the time, and Southern over in Tampa. And Southern had a bar, which meant you drove 50 minutes, and then you drank a few beers, and then you had to drive Tampa Road back, and that's not good. So I'm like, let's do something. So we found a way to find some property, and we renovated it and opened up a homebrew store. We didn't know anything about it. My wife got her business degree from University of Florida, so that helped. And we did SBA and started Vetter Brew Homebrew Supply, and the rest is 8 years now history. We're having a great time, meeting some of the best people in the world. Homebrewers they are just. Most of them are engineers, in case you didn't know that. I mean, it's funny, but homebrewing and engineering go very close, hand in hand. Do. But met some of the greatest people, gone to some of the greatest events, and that's sort of how I got where I'm at right now.
Because Greg was kind of a meticulous nut job.
He was.
Yeah. And I said that to him a couple of times, and he was not offended.
No, and he was one of the first to actually harvest and propagate his own yeast, and keep a yeast strain going. And I remember that was way out of the realm of most home brewers at the time.
A lot of breweries.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot of breweries.
Yeah, they're all ordering new always.
Right.
Yeah, saves you a lot of money when you can reuse that.
Right,
absolutely.
So then back to because I'm really wanting to know more about what's going on in homebrewing.
So, we have to kind of talk about home brewing, at least I think so, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, because pre-pandemic it was a world of camaraderie, beer festivals. I mean, we were so popular that homebrewers were invited to give away their beer at paid beer events, that at some point that became an issue because people were questioning, well, if I'm paying for a ticket, but I can't pay for your beer, and there's a lot of gray area there for stuff. So homebrewing was so popular that it was becoming an event all of its own. And we were actually, we've served our beer at Hunapoo Day back in the day, all our homebrewers in the area. And for us to be on the same level as a Cigar City or at Paul's events when we used to, Paul Unwin's place down in Pinellas Park, that was amazing to be standing side by side by all these professional breweries and serving our beer. And most important, getting feedback from people tasting your beer. Not always positive, not always what you want to hear, but at least it's their honest opinion, and it's part of the fun of sharing.
And as we talked about before we got started, they'll help you with anything. Almost any of them will do anything for you.
Absolutely, that's so.
The beauty of
it. One of the fun things when you own a shop is you get people who come in all the time, and the conversation starts with, I want to do this or I want to do that. It's a great place to start. And many times it'll meander around until I finally narrow them down to, I want to make a beer like this beer at this brewery, or I really like this beer. How can I make that beer? And like I was telling you, you need to just go talk to that brewer at that brewery. They would love to share their insight with you. There's nothing. I've never come across too much top secret stuff. Hops are hops, yeast is yeast, and you're not going to make the exact same beer.
No. I think that's the most interesting thing, is because some people, and there's people not far from us, that they really believe it is a secret, and even their staff doesn't know what the malt bill is, let's say, or something else. When really all the best brewers know that it doesn't matter. I'll give you anything you want to know. Because you're not going to replicate the process.
Or my equipment.
Exactly.
You just can't do it.
You can't do it.
Right. So the state of pre-pandemic was a glory. I like to say the glory days of home brewing for us.
That's hard to hear.
Fair.
Yeah, it was really great. And then after post-pandemic, it was really difficult. So one of the hardest things was homebrew stores during the pandemic exceeded expectations. Their sales were through the roof. We were 25% up over any year before.
Wow.
And sadly, I was going to breweries, and frequenting them to get to-go beer, whatever I could get during the pandemic, and seeing them struggle. And it was difficult because my business was just booming, and it was because people were coming back to make beer and wine that they couldn't go to their favorite place to get. And I knew it wouldn't last. I knew that once we got out of the pandemic that it would curtail, and it has. And I think it honestly is much more back to where it was for us as a homebrew store. Goes. And as far as the industry AHA, we participate in a survey they do, and they give us all the results. And it seems to be very equivalent across the United States, that it's slowly ticked back a little bit from the frenzy that it was during the pandemic.
Sure.
But post-pandemic, in the homebrew world, what we really lost, and what it makes me so sad, are those guilds, clubs, organizations that shared their knowledge, that had educational sessions, that had brew days. All of that has really curtailed and gotten a lot less. I do see it starting to return. But it's slow. It certainly isn't a light switch. Pandemic's over, boom, we're gonna have 15, 20 at our meeting, or 30, 40 at our meeting. No, it hasn't really done that. So I'm hoping that will continue.
Yeah, I was in Dunedin Brewers Guild for a hot minute. Not that I ever brewed, but mainly because they did an awesome event where they had the sensory panel. And I was like, they were like, join the guild. Maybe you brew one day, maybe you don't. But that sensory panel, it was expensive and invaluable, and it taught me a lot.
Yeah, we've done that. That's a great event to learn off flavors in beer, to learn what it is that you like and dislike in a beer. There are some beers that have a certain off flavor that we've just become accustomed to in this country. And there's a very popular green can one that we all like to drink. But that flavor, in my opinion, doesn't exist in their country. It's because of the travel, it's because of the time, whatever affects the beer by the time it gets to us. The light strike, whatever.
There.
Yeah, I've been. Yeah,
you've been there,
right? And and it tastes totally different there. So does Guinness, but that's a whole. That could be a whole other podcast. About that.
Sure.
But what's amazing is that those kind of events where you learn whether you're a super taster or a regular taster, whether you can when you can identify the different phenols in the beer that give the flavors. Why is it buttery? Why is it got a this smell? What is this odor I'm smelling? It's all a part about learning, and that's what the guilds and the clubs all do.
Exactly.
They really emphasize that.
Exactly. I should have also let Brad introduce himself because he's been home brewing how long?
Since 05.
05, a long time, and he brews some really awesome stuff in our conference room. The conference room is a brew lab. It's a brew lab. It's the office smells wonderful on some days, but. I wanted him to talk to you about the equipment he uses because that little anvil system seems, and I know Sylvester uses one up there at his place, and so you guys talk about that, and because it's a very it's affordable,
sure,
and it's easy, and it's a great entry level. For people who want to get into this. So I think maybe that's something you guys to talk about.
And Brad, we were talking that when I started 8 years ago, I had to leave the driveway, leave the propane burner. I used to joke with neighbors that when they'd see me out there with my kettles and my smoke and the steam and everything going, and they were like walking, and they'd say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm making meth." And they'd ha, they just laugh and keep going. But I had this big stainless steel rig and these pots going and everything, and now I brew on a Braumeister, you brew on the Anvil system.
Absolutely.
These electric systems have made it compact and easy. Unfortunately, that's hurt the camaraderie of getting together because now you just have to go somewhere where they have 240 plugs and 120 plugs and plenty of room, and then you're all sitting around waiting for something to beep. So it's a little different. But I can brew at my store all day, just like you can probably brew at your work while still doing your job.
Absolutely.
So the Braumeister waits for me. I set up a mash on it. I set up a boil time. I set up hop additions. And if I'm working on a customer's order, I'll hear it go beep, and they're like, "Oh, what's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got to go throw a hop in. I'll be right back." And I just go throw a hop in and then come back, and I can still get that all done. Still a lot of cleaning.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
that doesn't go away.
That doesn't go away.
No, he spends more time cleaning than anything
Absolutely.
else.
If you want to make a nice clean beer, you better be cleaning.
Yeah, you better start with
before, after, during,
Exactly.
any chance you got.
Yep. The number one mistake, and you probably have run across the number one mistake that most new homebrewers make is sanitation. And that spoon that they didn't sanitize that sat on their counter for 4 hours or 3 hours and picked up whatever flora and fauna is in their house or wherever they're at, and then they go and stir that yeast to get it all stirred around in there, and they've just introduced a bacteria that's faster than their yeast, and in 24, 48 hours they've got some crud growing on the top, and then they come in and want me to drink their beer and tell them what's wrong with it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay," and I'll try it, but most of the time sanitation is their number one enemy, and it's a hard process to learn.
It is.
Absolutely.
Well, I remember a brewer told me that I asked him because he was making some Brett beers, and I've heard terrible stories that this can get away from you, and his point was that they will only expose weaknesses in your process, in your sanitation, and if you've got a good solid sanitation procedure and you stick to it every single time, then you don't have that big of an issue, but it does get away from everybody. It gets away from professionals once in a while.
Yeah, Brett gets a bad rap that way, because it's like, this beer's contaminated. It must have Brett from a beer I did before, and it's like, well, the Brett didn't do that. You just didn't clean it, properly, right? Yeah. We had a great presentation right down here on Central Avenue at a place years ago, and we brought in, I think, who's the head? Do we know who the head of the St. Pete Brewing is?
I should, but
I can't think of her name right now. But she did a demonstration for us because homebrewers, they all feared Brett like crazy. Now as a homebrew store owner, I love that they wanted to have separate equipment for Brett beers
Right.
and clean beers, as they would put it. And I'm like, sure, you want to buy double hoses, you want to buy an extra fermenter, whatever, that's fine with me, but you don't need to, and I would tell them that. She explained that so many people thought that Brett could jump. That if you had equipment that had been exposed to Brett and you put it next to other equipment, that the Brett was somehow going to leap onto the other stuff and start growing there and then contaminate all your equipment. And she explained that, it doesn't jump. It's
not how it works.
It doesn't work that way. So, yes, it is a concern that many of us have. I just had a Brett beer on at the store. And I'll be honest with you, I just went through all these thoughts in my mind as I'm cleaning the kegerator lines to get ready to put another beer on at the store. And I'm like, I got to really make sure I clean this really well because because it sits there, for a while, it can just a little bit of Brett left in that line or whatever can start to contaminate it. So you do want to be clean.
I do know people that do have separate hoses.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Might be all they have in the brewery, but they do have sometimes because where the connections are can be difficult to clean. But yeah, it's sanitation is where this whole thing starts.
Absolutely.
And ends. So.
And isn't it kind of funny that we're going to talk about everything that we could have a professional brewers sitting here having these same conversations. Yeah. It's the same whether you're home brewing or professional. It's all about scale. And the most important thing for professional brewers, in my opinion, is repeatability. Yeah. And they have to repeat their beers, and their recipes have to be
consistent.
Home brewers, I'm the worst at it because my wife will say, hey, somebody left some grain back here. It's 4 pounds of Pilsner. I'm like, oh, leave it there. I'll make a beer out of it. I'll figure something out. So I tend to brew with whatever yeast is around that I need to use up or grain. I guess it's kind of like a baker, somebody who cooks. We got to use up that steak we have, so I'm going to make this, for dinner. So I end up doing that. So my repeatability is limited to maybe 1 or 2 beers that I try to do over and over again.
Right. Well, that's one of the things with AccuBrew that we're always about is trying to record and your process, because like we said earlier, you've done this because you've had those competitions where you gave everybody those kits years ago.
Sure, yeah.
And to see what would happen, and they were all using the exact same ingredients.
No, they had a large selection of ingredients. They could use what they wanted of it. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But even if you had given everybody exactly the same ingredients, you're going to get a different beer out of every one of them.
Yeah.
And they probably couldn't do it a second time, a lot of them, because they don't meticulously, like, he was so accurate because we're trying to develop the machine learning for our device, and he was so accurate and that anvil was so predictable that the algorithm didn't learn anything anymore. Because everything he did was so meticulous.
Yeah.
And so we had to purposely start doing things incorrectly to try to gather the information we needed. But what would be the main, other than that, what are some of the other things that the people that are already home brewing that would want to know what's going on new? Or if they were home brewing, let's say, and want to come back into it a little bit, what's going on new that might make it a little easier for them to get back up to speed?
Well, one of the things that happens a lot of times is people leave home brewing and they want to get rid of their equipment, and we don't sell other people's used equipment, and so I will ask them to look on Facebook or find a guild or a club somewhere in their area and post something there. But then when they want to come back, then they have to acquire all that equipment again, and they're like, "Dadgummit, I got rid of all my buckets and I got rid of everything." And so what we do is one of the events that's coming up. We haven't done it in a couple years, but we're going to do a swap sale day for homebrew clubs at the store, and all I do is set up a bunch of tables all around the outside of my building and invite homebrew clubs to come and bring anything that they want to sell or swap and trade with each other. And so they'll come out, and for a few hours we'll just have people perusing buckets and boil kettles and mash tuns and all these different pieces of equipment and saying, hey, I got one of these. I
Right.
need that,
Right.
but I could use that. And then they'll swap, or they'll say,
Right.
I can get that for $5.
So when are you
it's like-
planning that?
That's going to be in November. I don't have an
Okay.
exact
All
date
right.
yet, but
All
it'll
right.
be when it's cooler and we can be
Right.
outside without, melting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then that leads us straight into what are some of the upcoming homebrew events and other events? That are
Yeah,
in
so
the
I
area right now.
I kind of so I started on the Tempe Beer Week committee about a year ago, and I came on as a homebrew store owner, retail rep on their board, and so I try to advocate quite a bit for the homebrewers at the events that are put on for Tempe Beer Week. It's a great learning week in March, that whole week of events, and all the breweries get involved and do stuff. Many times there's talks, there's presentations. Heck, I think they've even had papers presented where people have done studies and things like that, as well as new beer releases, kinds of fun dinners. But on the Tempe Beer Week, we have two major events, the Tempe Beer Week itself in March, and then coming up Tempe Beer Week, it's called Halfway There in August, and it means because we're halfway to March. And so August 26th at the Coliseum, we're going to have Halfway There, and the tickets are still available for that. It's a great event. Now, it's all pro brewers at that event. Basically.
Right.
And there's going to be, I think there's 60 plus different breweries represented there and sharing their beer, food trucks, music. It'll be a great event, and that's the kind of thing we are hoping just continues to grow. I think ticket sales, from what I've kind of gleaned from our messages, are already exceeding 2019, which is a great sign.
Yeah,
great
that
sign.
really is.
And then on the homebrew side, we brought back last year for the first time Almost There. We joked that then we need to be, are we there? We need is this it? That kind of, we could have so many other events, but Almost There is in January, since we're almost to March, and it's pure homebrew, and it's a nice event held across the street at the Shuffleboard Club.
Oh, okay.
And we hope to be there again this year, date yet to be determined in January, usually end of January, away from any sports activities. And that is a free event. So it's limited in ticket sales just to limit the amount of people. But since we can't sell homebrew, we give it away.
Right.
And we had, I would say, 40 maybe different homebrews, 40, 50 different homebrew beers represented there last time, and food trucks and music and giveaways for the homebrewers. We get a lot of things given to us by people who produce things for homebrewing, and it's just a great time to be together. It was actually the first time in a couple of years, so everybody was excited to see each other and to see that guild or that club and to see how they're doing.
Very cool. How do homebrewers get involved in that?
So, one of the things that's super is that no matter where you live in Florida, since we're pretty much talking about this area, there's a homebrew club right down the street somewhere. That would be your avenue to participate in Almost There. It's also your avenue to participate in all the events we've just spoken about on this podcast, as well as Halfway There and getting reduced ticket prices, because homebrewers get a reduction in price by being in a guild or a club. We give a discount at our store. Many places give discounts. The AHA gives a discount at different places. But if you join your neighborhood homebrew club, and I can't name them all, but we just did an event with Dunedin Brewers Guild, Pub Guild in Largo, as well. They meet at RAP, Dunedin Brewers Guild in Dunedin. We meet at Troubled Waters quite a bit, Southern Lights quite a bit, and I'm in the Suncoast Barley Mashers. But there's Tampa Bay Beers, there's, oh my goodness, there's Special Operations,
right.
yes, across the
They're
bay.
pretty active.
They are very active,
Yeah.
yep. And we all meet up at these different events that go on throughout the year, and it's kind of fun to see faces again and go, hey, how you doing? I remember you, And do you still have that jalapeno saison?
Right.
And it's but it's fun,
Yeah. No, when I first started working behind the bar, going to these events, so that's where I met people that I've known now the whole time, for 14, 15 years now.
Right.
And they were, especially a couple of guys in a Barley Masters Guild, man, they were making some good beer.
Yeah.
That event you guys had at
Oh,
Dunbrew,
yeah.
I don't know, it's been 6 years
Well,
now.
we had Bob Sylvester was one of our founding
Yeah.
members. Bob
Right.
Bob was
I didn't know
also a
Right.
very anal about getting
Yeah.
everything to style and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
was really good about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Learned so much from
What is it,
him.
Mike Lee?
Mike Lee,
He
yep,
did a
my
good
son-in-law.
job.
That's my son-in-law.
Oh, that's
Yep,
right.
And you know
Yeah.
him because he's one of
Yeah.
your grandmaster poopah people
Yeah.
there, right?
He's an emperor.
He's an emperor.
Right.
That's what.
Right.
House of Beer,
Right. But, I mean, he made a couple of good beers.
He made some great beers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he was
did.
a big stout maker. He made some
Right.
amazing stouts,
Right.
and unfortunately, he's into barbecue now. So
Right.
he's shifted
Yeah, he's
gears
gone
from
pretty-
beer to barbecue.
He's probably gone overboard in barbecue.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I almost want to block him because I can't look at that anymore. It's so good.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's exactly the way you should do it. If you
Right.
want to get started, I mean, come in, get a kit from one of your homebrew stores that's near you. Take a class. We offer a free class every month. Once it's a beginning beer, next month it's an advanced all grain class. It's $10 actually for the class, but you get $10 back in the store, so it's basically free. And make your first beer. Give it a
Right.
shot. I
Right,
mean,
right.
I think $130 you can have your first case of beer made. 53 bottles of 12-ounce beers, and you're ready to go. You own all the equipment.
What's that software now?
Beersmith?
Beersmith.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, that really, or what?
Or Brewfather?
Yeah.
Brewfather, yeah.
Right. So either one of those help you develop a recipe real.
Absolutely.
Nothing as hard as it was years
Right,
ago.
right.
And then you will. You mash the grain for them. I mean,
Sure,
no,
well,
I mean,
we crush it, yeah.
You mill the grain.
Yeah, we'll mill the grain for them because that's an expensive piece of equipment
Sure,
to get into a mill.
sure.
So yeah, most homebrew stores have mills, so you can crack your grain. Since that's the most important part of the process,
Sure.
in my opinion, is to get that
Exactly.
grain cracked properly.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I really like that you guys have two separate ones. One that's a little
we try to
finer.
tighten one up and loosen one up because if they do a lot of wheat is much harder and it's a little it'll get stuck. So that's really why we try to give two choices. But yeah, and I have monster mills. Those are what I run in my. I built the boxes for them, but they're just champs. I mean, they just have held up really well. So,
Right.
don't have to regap them very often. That kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, those have been there for a
What
while.
would the basic list be of things to get started?
So
I mean, what's roughly going to cost? I
okay,
guess?
that's what I was saying. So
Yeah.
around $130 if you have your own bottles. Maybe $120. It depends kind of on the kit you buy. So like our least expensive is like a red ale kit, and I think it runs right around $28, $30 for 53 bottles of beer. So you're looking at, without the equipment, less than $1.
Is that an extract?
Yeah, it's an extract with steeping grains. Really,
Okay.
most of the kits no longer are just extract. They all have grains in them. And part of the reason is that way they can dial in more colors. When you're stuck to a can, a dark can, a light can, amber can,
Right.
whatever, you're stuck with that color.
right.
Yeah. But by putting some different grains in there and giving you a sack that you then steep on the stove in your small wort that you make, you can get all the spectrum of colors you need for every kind of beer and flavor and more wheat. If you're doing a wheat beer, you can actually add wheat to it instead of just wheat malt in a can. You can actually add cracked wheat or flaked wheat.
Things have changed a
Oh.
hell of a lot.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's how I started too. Was with the extract with steeping grain kits as well, and just moved on from there. But that's one of my favorite things with homebrewing is it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. You can start with just these extract kits and you can stick with it. There's people who
Right.
make great beers with just extract kits.
Right.
So that's really one of the nicest parts of it is you can make it as easy or as complicated as you want.
Right. And the basic process hasn't changed in 1,000 years. I mean, it's, you heat water up, you steep the grains to extract the sugar, and then you boil it so that it converts the sugar to a fermentable sugar. You cool it so you don't kill the yeast. You pitch your yeast. You wait for those little buggers to do their dance and get everything all ready to go. They're going to give you carbon dioxide and they're going to give you alcohol. And the carbon dioxide leaves and the alcohol remains. And at that point, actually, in Florida, legally it's beer the minute you pitch yeast. So if you're, legality wise, it's a beer as soon as you pitch the yeast, whether it ferments or not. It's a beer. So, and then at that point you're going to feed the yeast a little bit of sugar, bottle it away, put it away in a warm spot, and 7 to 10 days crack that first beer.
Magical.
And it's a magical event when you crack it and you say, I made this.
Yeah.
So.
It's got to be cool.
Yeah, it really is.
I am always been somebody said something to me one time, and I'm like, well, I have the luxury of really only tasting beer that's okay, because by the time it gets to me, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know what bad beer tasted like
Right.
half the time,
Yeah.
So I always thought that the brewers, and especially the home brewers, had such a huge leg up because they had made mistakes, all
Yeah.
of them, and they know what I was missing,
Right.
Right. So, what else do we? Let's see. We've covered gills. We've covered events. What else?
Well, I don't know. I think what's
We'll
the
edit some
future?
of that, by
Yeah,
the
what's
way.
the future hold?
There we go.
For home brewing.
So, Michael,
Yeah.
what's the future of home brewing looking like these days?
Everybody was concerned that it was all going to go online, that the homebrew shop would disappear, the mom and pop, whatever you want to call it, but that just hasn't happened. And part of the reason is grain is expensive to ship. And if you want to buy a 55-pound sack of grain, you're much better off going down the street to your homebrew store and buying it than you are getting it shipped to you. There's just no way they can compete with that.
Right.
And living in Florida, the heat, waiting for yeast to come on a truck in Florida during May, June, July, August, September, your yeast is not going to be any good if it's come in a hot truck. So those are all issues that we had to deal with. I think that online will always have its place. I mean, obviously these northern brewers and more beers of the world, they are serving a crowd that can't get to a homebrew store.
Right.
That makes perfect sense. But
Right.
if you have a homebrew store in your area, it is worth the drive to go there
Absolutely.
to talk to people who like what you know.
I think
I would like to see
that's
that
what
happen.
it sounds
Yeah.
like. The more important
Yeah.
is being able to talk to other people.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that would hopefully be what makes it something that never goes away.
Yeah.
I mean,
Because you can't get that online.
having that last minute, I'm in the middle of a brew resource as well that I can run down the street and grab something that I forgot about is also,
Yeah.
key, because you can't do that online, right? Like
No.
you can order it and, if you really want to pay a lot of money, you can have it
Yeah.
tomorrow,
Mhm.
but still it's
Yeah.
not going to be here till tomorrow.
Well, no, I know
so-
for a fact that our brewers have run into your place once or twice.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Where,
Yeah.
professionals take advantage of the quick hop and a drive to save the day.
They
So,
really do, yeah.
yeah.
And I do, and I as a homebrew advocate, it hurts sometimes when they clean you out of all your rice hulls, and you're like, wait, you're buying 40 bags of rice hulls, my brewer who wants one little bag of rice hulls will not have them. So oftentimes they'll say, okay, I'll leave you a few. I won't take them all.
You need a couple
whatever.
pounds.
Yeah, and so they understand that
Sure,
too. So,
sure.
But it is definitely an amazing hobby,
Right.
career.
Community.
Yeah,
It's a
community love.
thing
It
is
is,
what,
yeah,
is what
it
I've
is.
seen out
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, that has been my biggest thing was the collaborative, nature of this community. Like you were saying, if you ask people, they're willing and
Yeah.
ready to tell you about their beer and how they made it. And one of my favorite things is, brewers are a bit of a show off. They like to show off, so that
Yeah.
means I get to drink beer. Which is a fantastic
Yeah.
thing. So
Right.
it makes it a lot of fun to be
Yeah.
collaborative and see the joy in people's faces when you're enjoying their beer.
Right.
And we kind of left out talking about one other big aspect of homebrewing, and that is competitions. And there are numerous competitions around the state. As a matter of fact, we have a statewide competition for homebrew clubs that tracks points made by the members of the club in these different competitions. And then at the end of the year, they have a big trophy, and they put the name of. So, I think Pub Guild's won it a couple years. They're
It
very
wouldn't surprise me.
They're
yeah.
very
Yeah.
competitive, and
Right.
our guild not so much.
Right.
We brew, and every now and then we'll send one in. We have our Oktoberfest competition going on right now. Suncoast Barley Mashers and Vetter Brew, we're doing one in October, and so right now on reggiebeer.com, which is a great place to find all the competitions, South America, I mean the whole world. He has them there.
What is that?
And you can sign up. reggiebeer.com.
REGGIE.
It's run by Nolan Crowell.
Oh,
Did I get the name right?
I don't. It's sounding
Nelson
Nelson
Crowell. Yeah.
Nelson. No
He
way.
put it together. Yep.
Oh, I'll
Yep.
be damned. I haven't seen him in years.
Yeah, and
Where is
it's
he now? Not
I
to
think
give away
he's,
secrets.
I think he's
but
still in the area.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in ages.
He's an email link for me, so
Right,
that's the
right,
best way
right,
I get
right.
him. But yeah,
was
yeah,
was he in Dunedin?
he was in
Guild?
Dunedin Brewers
Yeah,
Guild.
I think
yeah.
so. Yeah.
So he put together this
Haven't heard
website
that
that
name
lets
in
you register
ages.
your comps,
Nice.
and it's amazing
Right.
piece of engineering feat, this website,
Right.
because it prints out the winners, it prints out a PowerPoint for the show for homebrewers when they're giving the awards away, and
Right.
so yeah, and anybody can go to reggiebeer.com and look at all the events that are happening all over the world that he has registered. Ours is
Was
there.
he the one that was, he was working on, in the early days of a competitor, Untapped or something? Somebody in this area was
I
doing
don't know.
that, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me if it's him.
Yeah, I'm
That
sure we'll
could
hear
doing
about it
this
if
now.
somebody,
Yeah,
somebody's
somebody's
going to
gonna let us know how
comment.
stupid
Yeah,
I am.
exactly.
I embarrass myself every time I open my mouth, so it doesn't
Me
matter.
too. Me too.
People are used to me not remembering a bloody thing.
That's
so
right. I'm a face person.
Yeah.
I'm not a name person.
Right.
You know, so.
Faces are fading for me now, so. All right, well, I really thank you enough. And Brad, anything you want to say? You know, Brad has been, he won't talk too much about himself, but he's been instrumental in developing the AccuBrew sensor, building all the prototypes, designing the circuit boards, and brewing a pile of beer. And it's just
A lot of beer.
it's
And maybe a
lot of
homebrew,
beer.
maybe a homebrew version someday.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
that's
will.
definitely-
We will.
Once
We
we
will
get
have
all
that.
the kinks and things ironed out with the pro version,
Yeah.
we're definitely wanting to move
Yeah,
on to,
yeah, that'd be
to
great.
something
It
for
would- it
it's
will
it's
be.
a much bigger community. You know, there's only so many breweries with so many tanks in the United States, and there's a whole lot more home brewers.
That's,
and
Yeah.
that's true.
hopefully it'll pick up, and there'll be even more soon, as well, which would be wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming in. This is Time is Ingredient, and that was Michael Vetter and Bradley Fernandez, our engineer. And we hope you've learned a little something about how hard it can be and how fun it can be to put a beer in the glass. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much. Take care.
Bye, guys.